Emmanuel Macron has just issued an apology for horrific crimes France did during the colonial period for one of its African colonies. In this video, I'm going to tell you what the story is, but also explain why this is such a slap in the face. And actually, what's more important than the story itself and what's going on is the fact that so many people do not understand the mechanisms by which the modern world subjugates, oppresses, and keeps Africa under neo-colonial rule. So when you watch a video like this, not only might you be educating yourself about what's going on, it tells the algorithm to share this message to more people. So if you're interested in the freedom and the betterment of the continent of Africa, I highly recommend sticking around. Thank you so much for joining me on this video. If you don't know me, my name is TJ. I'm Nigerian and British mixed. And on this channel, we talk about African geopolitics. So I said something slightly misleading at the beginning of the video. Macron hasn't actually apologized for anything, but what he's done is acknowledged that there were some problems that happened. And which country does it concern? It concerns the country of Cameroon. Cameroon, of course, is on the verge of a sort of civil rebellion because Paul Biya, the president, is very old. He's been in government for many years, and he's just announced his candidacy for the next presidential term. So what is the game that France is playing? You might say a president that lasts so long is a friend of the ex-colonial power or the neo-colonial power that is France. Let's use this article to figure it out. Macron admits French repression in Cameroon's independence struggle. So what we're talking about is the time which Cameroonians were trying to free themselves. French President Emmanuel Macron has acknowledged the violence committed by his country's forces in Cameroon during and after the Central African nation's struggle for independence. It follows a joint report by Cameroonian and French historians examining French's suppression of independence movements in 1945 to 1971. That is not too long ago. In a letter to Cameroon's president by Paul Biya made public on Tuesday, Macron said the report made clear a war had taken place in Cameroon during the colonial authorities and French army exercised repressive violence of several kinds in certain regions of the country. It's up to me today to assume the role and responsibility of France in these events, he said. So he's saying he wants to take responsibility for these crimes committed. Well, let's look at what happened. However, Macron fell short of offering a clear apology for the atrocities committed by French troops in its former colony, which gained independence in 1960. The French leader cited 4 independence icons who were killed during military operations led by French forces, including Ruben Umniobe, firebrand leader of the anti-colonialist UPC party. So if you were interested in anti-colonialism in the 60s and the 70s, France would kill you. That's what happened here. French pushed hundreds and thousands of Cameroonians, hundreds of thousands, into internment camps, supported brutal militants to quash the independence struggle. The AFP news agency quotes the report as saying tens of thousands were killed between 1956 and 1961, the historian report said. So hundreds of thousands were put in internment camps, tens of thousands were killed. And this is basically in the living memory of someone like my parents, like a generation that came before me. The decision to investigate and publish the findings of France's role in Cameroon's independence struggle was made in 2022 during Macron's visit to Yaoundé. It follows pressure from within the country of France to acknowledge its atrocities in its former colony and pay reparations. Professor Willibord Deze-Ngwa told the BBC it was not within the historian's remit to recommend reparations. Reparations only come after judgment has been passed. So basically, one of the historians is saying, look, I didn't do this so that he could recommend an apology. I just did this to make sure the facts rose to the top and people understand exactly what happened. I think reparations are not a realistic solution. It might be the right solution, but it's not realistic. First of all, Europe America, all of these countries, they're in massive debt themselves. They're bankrupt. They're trying to figure out their budgets. And I'm not saying this is justification. Just hold on for a second. But my point is, you're never going to get blood out of a stone. What we need to do, if we really want to get our reparations, is maneuver effectively, this is my opinion, into the future. That means we need to put Africa in a position where those guys desperately need what we have, which they already do. But we need to exert such leverage on the fact that they need this stuff that it will make Africa as a continent rich. At the moment, and we're going to get onto the systems that prevent this from happening right now, we need to focus on releasing ourselves from the systems of control that prevent Africa from truly profiting from its vast wealth. Wealth, the likes of which the rest of the world could not compete with if we just managed it properly. While we're there crying for reparations, whether you think it's justified or not, it doesn't matter if they are still taking out the resources of Africa for pennies on the dollar without the African people benefiting for it. For example, the Democratic Republic of Congo has some 30 trillion plus in untapped resources in the ground right now. It's enough to build new cities, eradicate poverty, make sure there's no starving children, build infrastructure in the whole continent of Africa, let alone the DRC itself. That's not counting the rest of the continent of Africa, which has much to offer. Even if they give the continent of Africa the money, we are not yet faithful with the riches that we have right now. We do not know how to manage that. We still allow people to control everything we have. Macron also expressed willingness to work with Cameroon to promote further research on France's historic colonial role, while highlighting the need for both countries to make the findings available to universities and scientific bodies. The BBC has reached out to the Cameroon government for comment on the French president's admission. While Macron did not address calls for reparations, it's likely to be a key talking point in Cameroon going forward. His comments have a mixed reception amongst Cameroonians. Tell me, what is research going to do? If they've done the research right now and they've acknowledged that 100,000 people were put in internment camps and tens of thousands of people were killed, and they won't even give an apology, what is uncovering more going to do? They won't even apologize for the stuff they have currently uncovered. And this is where the beginning of the slap in the face to Africans begins. He added that France had done too much harm to the Cameroonians. Okay, what are you going to do about all of that then? Is it just words, or is there going to be actions behind this? While 54-year-old teacher Desoye Bruno told the BBC it was a good thing that Macron had acknowledged France's colonial violence, but added his lack of apology is a very bad thing. Under Macron, France has attempted to confront its brutal colonial past. Really? Is that so? Last year, it acknowledged for the first time that soldiers had carried out a massacre in Senegal in which West African troops were killed in 1944. What is the point of an acknowledgement if no action comes behind it? Imagine there's a thief and he's stealing from your shop. I've acknowledged that I've stole from you. Is that enough? In a law and order society, whether he acknowledges or not is actually of little consequence. He could go down kicking and screaming to jail saying I'm innocent. But this system in place of accountability forces him to be punished for the acts that he has done. Now, in my opinion, we've got this backwards. France now lives in a world where they are allowed to acknowledge the crimes that they did in their past, that harmed Africa, that caused the bloodshed of African sons and daughters. But there's no action that comes behind it. So in my opinion, this is a feeble attempt by Emmanuel Macron to position France as some kind of ally, as some kind of understanding partner, a compassionate overseer, if you will. And I urge the people of Cameroon and the people of Africa to see right through this nonsense. France currently still acts in Cameroon under the pact for the continuation of colonization. It is an agreement that France still controls Cameroon by. And the central piece of this pact for the continuation of colonization, a real document, a real agreement that was signed by Cameroon and the 13 other French ex-colonies, is the CFA franc, the financial system that is controlled by France, that is printed by France, and that requires a percentage, a significant percentage of the money that these French countries own to be held in the French Treasury outside the control of African countries. The estimated amount is $500 billion a year in African wealth that is held and controlled in France. That money has to be applied for by the African countries if they want to use it, and it is given back to them, their own money, as a loan. It is a system of indebtedness that, as Macron right now is acknowledging his crimes, he is unwilling to break. He is unwilling to change, because not only does it have the power to cause significant financial damage to the economy of France, but it keeps Cameroon in a perpetual state of control and subjugation. It is the mechanism by which allows the president, Paul Biya, to maintain his position, to persecute the opposition that is trying to free themselves of a president that also allows that system to continue. The apology was not even an apology. It was an acknowledgement. And the acknowledgement means absolutely nothing when you keep the chains of colonialism firmly wrapped around a country. The chains that were helped put there by the murders and killings that you've just acknowledged. It is so evil and so dark, people just do not even understand this. The rest of the world is more or less oblivious to how this system works. Even if they gave Cameroon reparations, the system is in place that just extracts the wealth out of the country continuously and perpetually. That goes for every Francophone country. But before we get too overwhelmed with negativity, there is some hope, some light at the end of the tunnel. Let's check it out. Recently, several West African countries under military rule, including Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, have severed their ties with France, accusing it of continued neo-colonial control. Africa is waking up. It is the Sahel states that are the ones breaking out of this system, which is why we have to massively support their movement. And the internet is a big reason why everybody knows Ibrahim Traore. Of course, we have to do our best to promote what he's doing, because we want to break the bondage by which the West has put Africa in. They are currently trying to build a currency and a banking system that separates themselves from the CFA franc. This is an act of war. And a country like Cameroon should be joining them. Ivory Coast should be joining them. All of the French-speaking nations should be joining them, so that as a group, the CFA franc is completely broken and eradicated, so that France will have to figure out its own way to make its own economy work without continued colonization of Africa. Now, I think this acknowledgement comes because it doesn't matter if Paul Biya stays in power for the rest of his life. He doesn't have much time left. And whatever president or leadership comes into power is likely to side with the AES, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, at least if they get a fair shake. And basically, France cannot afford for that to happen. France is not your ally. Macron is not a compassionate leader. He doesn't apologize. He acknowledges. He doesn't take away the shackles. He keeps them in place. We have to call this thing what it is and choose the path for the betterment of the grandkids of the continent of Africa. I would love to know what you think about this in the comments section. I'm always fascinated by the opinions I see down there. But if you have nothing to say, would it be too much for me to ask you to write the words, "Get France out of Africa," in the comments section? It just lets me know that you like the video, you watched to the end, you're supporting the channel, and you want me to continue. Thank you so much for watching this video today, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.